Somebody has their, I think Melissa might have, somebody has their,
Yeah, everybody could please mute,
yeah,
and then we can get started.
great. By accidentally, a few people have, Carolyn, do you have capacity to take care of that while I'm talking?
Everybody could please mute, and then we can get started.
Great.
Yeah, if you give me a co-host.
Okay. So you don't automatically have co-hosts. Let me just find you then.
Give me a co-host.
I am. Yeah, I've made you co-host. Great. So now we can have you do that while I talk, because I won't be able to do both at the same time.
Yeah.
All right. You can press mute. If you're not on mute, it's that way I can begin, because some people
now we can have you do that while I talk, because I won't be able to do both at the same time.
Yeah.
All right. You can press mute. If you're not on mute, it's that way I can begin, because some people now we can have you do that while I talk, because I won't be able to do both at the same time.
Merlin, something's wrong here.
All right. You can press mute. If you're not on mute,
it's just repeating what I've said over and over and over. You're having technical glitches. Yeah, I did mute everyone, but then people are unmuting.
It's just repeating what I've said over and over and over. They're having something wrong.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Okay, everyone can hear me. Okay, we have had quite the challenging morning. There's some sort of technical glitch. My words were going round and round in circles. It looks like we can begin. Oh my goodness. I've never had that happen before, but this is a first. This is good. A little resilience in my life. I need to have a little resilience, a little time where my brain goes, okay, we can deal with this. It's all good. So we're going to just dive right in. Everyone can hear me? Yes? Okay, good. And we will start. Wonderful. We're going to be recording this and sending it out, because over double the people didn't get in. And so people, were frustrating. All right. Yes, Fernanda, I'm gonna have a little resilience this morning. So let's start. Okay, let's take a deep breath. Just close your eyes for a moment if you're comfortable. And if you're not comfortable, just go into your head. If you're somewhere where, closing your eyes is a little weird, just go into your own imagination for a moment. I want you for a moment to imagine a wilted plant, okay? Just imagine you're at home, you're in your living room, or you're in your kitchen, or wherever you are, and you look over to your window ledge, and you see that your plant is wilted. Its leaves are hanging over, it's limp, maybe the edges of the plant are browning a little bit. And what would be the very first thing, you can open your eyes now, the very first thing, just intuitively, which is gut reaction instantly, that you would probably say to yourself if you saw that your plant was wilted a little bit? If you want to just type into the chat, feel free. Very first thing, you look over, you see your plant is wilted. What do you probably say to yourself? Yeah, almost everybody says I should water it, or sunlight, water. Exactly. This is intuitive to us. Guilty. Yeah, I can see that too. Is that we would know intuitively to go to the conditions, that if the conditions were conducive, that our plant would thrive. It doesn't need to be rewarded to thrive, bribed to thrive, encouraged to thrive, that the plant has every single thing inside of itself to thrive, should the conditions be conducive. This is the exact same thing with humans, with children. Let's just talk about children specifically right now. A child's behavior is kind of like a cue, like a window into their internal world. It's saying something's working in my conditions, or something's not really working in my conditions. If, like in Western culture, we become, over the past era of time, past few years, we've become very behavioral, in that we often just look at the behavior and try to fix the behavior. If I took the plant analogy even farther, that might mean, like, I did something like, oh my gosh, I need to fix the leaves. I'm going to paint them green. I'm going to tape them up. I'm going to be like, wow, look at this. This is amazing. My plant is thriving. But obviously it wouldn't last, because I didn't get to the root cause, whether it was sun or water or whatever it was. So what would happen is that over time, the paint would come off, the tape would come down, because I didn't get to the root cause. This is what happens when we only work on a child's behavior versus why is that behavior there in the first place? If we're just like, stop it or cut it out, or what bribe can I give this kid to change them, or what reward can I incentivize with this child, it may work long term, it may work short term, but it will never work long term because I didn't get to the root cause of why my student, why this child had that behavior in the first place. Now, we now have a much shorter workshop, so I'm going to have to cut down this material. And, some of you might be coming to my workshop this afternoon and get some of it there. But if you ever go to a workshop and you just have to memorize something, it will never last with you. You'll leave that workshop and in a month or two, you'll be like, what did that lady say again? Even in this 45 minutes or 50 minutes that we have left together, in order for this 50 minutes to actually have any opportunity of having lasting change on you, it has to hit your intuition. It has to ignite your insight. It has to be not about memorizing, but about igniting something within you so that when you leave here, you're just like, oh, I get it. I see something differently. And so that's my hopes in the next 40 minutes. I don't have much time now, but we're gonna dive into this in the 40 minutes. So in order to do that, we have to start with what is going on with kids before we look at strategies. If you ever have to memorize strategies in a vacuum, they won't make sense to you because teaching is like parenting. It's not a set of skills. It's a relationship that you have, your unique style, sense of agency with the unique children that you work with. So it has to be rooted in insight, not memorization. And so let's start with what's going on. What is going on right now with children? We have an epidemic of anxiety. We have an epidemic of aggression. We're seeing more explosive, aggressive energy in younger and younger ages. And we also have an epidemic of what we call shut down kids. Whatever, doesn't matter, I don't care. Almost like there's no feelings, no curiosity, no sense of their gorgeous place in this world. And so let's look at what's going on. In our book, we kind of go into three sort of main cultural shifts that have wreaked havoc on children. But I want to go into right now in this very short period of time that I have left, I'm only going to go into one because we've had to shorten this workshop because of the technical glitches. And so one of the key shifts that affected children and our teens and adolescents in ways that we could never have predicted is that in Western culture and cultures that are emulating now Western culture, we have replaced play with entertainment. I'm going to say this again because unless we understand what happened, it's very hard to understand what happened, like how we're going to address it with kids. We have replaced play with entertainment. Entertainment is the in-breath. And play is nature's out-breath. And we have children that are breathing in and 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 in, and they are not coping. This is the very first generation of children since the dawn of time in all history that does not have a play-based childhood. This never happened in all history. Now, what happened with the invention of devices that travel with children is that it took away something absolutely crucial to child development. Not something that was kind of, sort of, maybe a little bit helpful, but something that is absolutely crucial. And that's what we call void moments. Void moments are these sort of like empty, gentle times of nothing. Basically, the time a child sits in a car and looks out the window and counts telephone poles, or lies on a trampoline and watches the clouds change shape, or sits at a bus stop and just thinks their thoughts, feels their feelings, whatever it is. They're empty times of nothing where no stimulation is coming in. Most children of this generation have lost their void moments with absolutely dire consequences. I'm going to look at it both with children and with teens because it's affected them in different ways. With children, How it works is that free play takes root in basically boredom or lack of stimulation when a child is not being played with, entertained by a structured activity like soccer, hockey, dance, etc., or playing a video game or being stimulated by a device. In the lack of that stimulation, there's supposed to be a void in which a child senses a stirring within them that engages them and pulls them into an activity. That's what free play is, whether they're drawing something or playing with their trains or building a fort or playing with their doll or truck or whatever it is. Something from within them is stirred to be engaged in an activity. Free play takes root in a void, in that lack of stimulation. Play is what takes care of anxiety and aggression and wires the brain to lower aggression. If you take away boredom, you take away free play. If you take away play, watch the behavior in a culture go crazy. Because play is what is supporting anxiety and aggression, which I'll have a little bit of time to go into. I'll go more into it this afternoon in our cell phone workshop as well, how cell phones interfered with that process indirectly. There's direct and indirect ways that happened, but I don't have tons of time now to go into it. But I will give you just a window in, just a little peek into how play takes care of this thing, how play takes care of anxiety, because many of us have a limited understanding that, we think of play, we think of little kids and toys. We're not thinking of an out-breath. We're not understanding the deep and extraordinary ways that play takes care of anxiety. So let me give you a tiny window in this brief little half an hour we have together here now. When we see that children all around the world are playing the exact same games, or children are playing with the exact same themes within their games in every single culture in the world, it tells us both something about a child's psychology, as well as how play is soothing the child's psychology, because this is what play does. It's where children digest and process their world. And so one window into that is to take a look at the study of children's literature. There's one theme, and you can guess this in the chat if you'd like to. It's kind of a fun thing, especially if you've never taken one of my workshops before, then feel free to guess. There's one theme in children's literature that's the most common theme in the entire world and every culture that has been studied. Think novels or films in which children about ages 4 and 5 up to about ages 15, 16 years old are driven in droves. It's the most common theme in the entire world to read about. Think novels, not little skinny books, but think novels or movies. If anyone wants to guess, most common theme in the entire world, in every single culture that has been studied, children are driven in absolute droves to read books which encompass this theme. So we have heroes, we have love, we have adventure. All of these things are absolutely true. Before the love, before the child turns into a hero, before that they find the belonging and the adventures, we find out something at the very beginning of the book or the movie about this character. Before they find their identity, their friendship, all of these things are true. But at the very beginning, the author tells us something about this character. So I'm going to dive in here and I'll just answer it because all of these things are true. Everything you've written in here is true. It's identity, it's good versus evil, all these things. But the very beginning, we find out that the child has been orphaned. Yes, loneliness is real. Yes. Being orphaned is the most common theme in the entire world that children are driven in droves to read. Think about it for a moment. Harry Potter, Anne of Green Gables, Secret Garden, Lion King, Bambi, Boxcar Children, Batman, Superman, Pippi Longstockings, Annie, Oliver. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on and on and on. Children's authors know this. They want a bestseller. They just kill the parents right away. Walt Disney understood this extraordinary processing ache that children are drawn towards. Now, what does this tell us about play? What does this tell us about emotional health? What does this tell us about what's going on in our culture? What's the link here? A child's greatest need is attachment. Human babies, human children cannot survive without their attachments. Unlike some mammals, we cannot walk, we cannot talk. We don't even learn to emotionally regulate until a caring adult has regulated us hundreds of times and soothed us when we've been sad. And therefore, a child has this, it's their greatest fear. Their greatest fear is to lose their attachments. In fact, a hungry human baby will choose attachment over food. So what they're doing is they're processing it one step removed. It's not them that loses their parent, it's the character. This is how play works. It's always one step removed. And they see these characters survive in the face of their greatest fear. And not only do they survive, like Harry Potter or Superman, these characters thrive. Like Superman, he can fly, he can take care of everybody. And their children don't know this or understand this. They're not meant to. That's why play works. It's why it works for children of all abilities, because it's a deep place of processing that's not evoking the defense system. Now, I don't have time to go into all the ways this happens, but what we see is that play is doing this in hundreds and hundreds of ways. It's processing aggression, it's processing frustration, it's processing alarm that percolates and stirs within children. And so if you remove the place in a culture that takes care of anxiety, kids just have it instead. If you remove this, I want to share my screen now. It might take me a minute here because I wasn't able to set it up because here we go. So here we are. I want to look now at aggression and what we can do here. In a culture that has removed play, and now the other cultural factors, we're living in a culture of disconnection as well. Many of the anchor connection points that kids have been removed. This is not a blame on a specific family. This is now something, this is just a cultural shift. Schools never used to have to talk about play before. Maybe kindergarten classes talked about it, but that was it. Because children were showing up to us emotionally rested. They would arrive emotionally rested, and now they're not. Children's bodies are on high alert. Sensitivities are increasing. Tags are bothering kids' socks. Their bodies are on high alert because they're not coping. And now all of a sudden schools are saying, what are we going to do? Because we can't even build a relationship with kids in the ways that we used to. Kids are exploding. They're not first in line and they're like, having a massive tantrum. They lose a game and they're just exploding. We are not able to teach in the ways that we used to be able to teach. Children used to have hours a day playing outside, hours in which they'd practice courage. I'm the youngest of 9, and I had 11 foster brothers and sisters as well growing up. So when I came home from school, my mother would have sent us outside to play after school, given us a snack, and then sent us outside and not let me back in the house until supper time. This was the norm. We knew where our grown-ups were, should we need them, but they were not outside with us. We were riding our bikes, climbing trees, practicing courage, and developing a strong sense of capacity. And we have a very fragile generation of kids who are not digesting their alarm nor practicing courage. In this space, we're going to see way more aggression, way more aggression. Now, as I talked to you about the plant analogy at the beginning, if you imagine that this is the behavior of aggression, we just see the behavior. You can't see emotion. But behind every behavior we see, there's an emotion that drives that behavior. As long as we're only working on behavior, it will never go away. That's why in our book, we have a chapter on what's behind the behavior of bossy, or what's behind the behavior of disruption, or what's behind the behavior of resistance, because we have to start looking at root causes. And so let's take a look at this. Feel free, by the way, to ask any questions that you may have. Any questions that you may have as we go. Now, what happens here is that we know that the emotion that drives the behavior of aggression is frustration. So you can just translate to yourself right away. When you see an aggressive kid, you can say, oh, they're frustrated. This is a frustrated kid. Frustration builds up in their systems, and it explodes in various ways. Yeah, the name of my book is Reclaiming Our Students, Why Children Are More Anxious, Aggressive, and Shut Down Than Ever, and what we can do about it. And I can type it in at the end. Yeah, no problem. Or I'll pull up a slide at the end. No problem at all. So frustration built up. Now, if the child does not yet have impulse control, it's likely to come out in things like biting and throwing, yelling and screaming, fits and tantrums, hitting and fighting. As humans develop impulse control, our aggression tends to leak out more subtly in things like sarcasm that's meant to hurt you, or an insult, silent treatment, shaming. This is what happens as humans develop impulse control. Our aggression tends to be subtler. Remembering that's what's underneath any of those behavior, though, is frustration. So I'm going to walk you through a traffic circle. Since we lost 45 minutes, I'm kind of had to pick and choose here what I'm going to share with you. And to me, this is one of the key components of what we can do to help kids adapt right now. So let's take a look at this. Imagine frustration entering a kid's system. Okay, imagine frustration entering a child's system, one of your student systems. This is based, by the way, on Dr. Gordon Neufeld's traffic circle model of frustration. So imagine now every single emotion humans have, we have for a reason. The reason humans have frustration is that it drives action. When you're frustrated, you try to fix something. You're like, frustrated at work, you're going to go to your boss and say, hey, can we talk about this? Can we figure this out together? It stirs you up enough. If you're frustrated about a social injustice cause, you're like, I'm going to fight for this. This is why we get frustrated, okay? Now, let's look at how this works with a student. Let's imagine you have a student who's on the playground and sees another kid who has a ball. He wants that ball. Let's imagine he's a 5-year-old kid. He sees a kid with a ball. He doesn't have a ball. Frustration starts to stir in him because he wants that ball. Human nature has it that he's going to try and get his way because this is how it works. He's going to go up to that kid and say, can I have a turn with that ball? If the kid over here says, sure, take the ball, frustration's gone. But that's often not the way it works. So let's try that again. This kid says, can I have the ball? And this kid says, no, I'm having my own turn. Go away. It's my turn. He might try harder. Give me a turn with the ball. I want a turn. He might even try and grab the ball out of the other child's hand. If he does not have impulse control, that's very likely. Now, what's meant to happen is that when a child cannot get the change they wish for, whatever that is, whether it's a ball, whether it's that they wish to play with a child that doesn't actually want to play with them, whether it's that their parents are getting divorced, whether it's that they didn't get into the class that they really wished for, whether it's that they can't do some work that they really wish that they could understand and can't do, whatever that is. When a child reaches that wall and realizes they're not going to get the thing that they really want, their energy's meant to move down to adaptation. But this is going to take me about 5 minutes to walk through. But I really want to explain this because once I understood this model, it changed everything for me in terms of my own understanding of my own frustration, my own children's frustration, as well as all the students I was working with. First of all, that block has to be completely blocked. If a child senses that the person's going to give in or they seem hesitant, they will push against it forever and you will have a much more explosive child. But here's the thing. It's in the mode of sadness or disappointment that the brain recognizes that it can survive not getting what it wants. But we are a culture that is allergic to sadness, especially allergic to sadness in children. Like I think about this, going to HomeSense right now, everything is live, laugh, love. Everything's about positivity. This is not where resilience comes from. It's not about positivity. I don't know if any of you saw the movie Inside Out, but the producers of Inside Out, the people who made Inside Out, They made that movie trying to highlight the model of resilience that comes from sadness. Because they're like, our culture's not getting it. We are trying to force positivity on children, and we have the least resilient kids of any generation. In the movie, if you haven't seen it, or even if you have, it's a little reminder, Bing Bong is one of the main characters. Bing Bong, all of his toys go over a cliff. And the character, just imagine that for a moment. Just really let that sink in. All of your things, your house burns down, or all of your house goes over a cliff. All of your things are gone. The character of Joy comes up to Bing Bong and she's like, "It's okay, Bing Bong. We'll get you new toys. It's okay." That doesn't make it Bing Bong feel any better at all. Bing Bong's still sitting there, like sad. Then the character of Sadness comes up to Bing Bong. She sits next to him and she puts her head on Bing Bong's shoulder and she says, "You loved those toys and they're gone forever." At which point in the film, the character of Joy is on the edge of the screen and she's literally pulling out her hair. She's like, "Sadness, stop. You're making it worse. Stop." But Sadness doesn't stop. In fact, Sadness warms up her voice even more. And she says, "Those were your favorite toys and they're gone forever." At which point Bing Bong bursts into tears. Now, we don't have to make our students cry, but in the film, they had to make Bing Bong cry because they were trying to show the science of resilience. In the film, Bing Bong bursts into tears, those deep tears that humans have when we finally someone sees our pain. Bing Bong's like, "I'm okay now. I'm okay now." And then he takes Sadness's hand, and hand in hand, they walk away. And Joy's like, "How did you do that? How did you do that, Sadness?" And Sadness like, I don't know. He was just sad. And I just talked to him about him being sad." Now, here's the thing, is the tears that humans have when they reach what's called the wall of futility, when they realize they're not going to get the thing they ache for, whether it's as simple as a ball or a cookie before lunch, or whether it's not getting into the class they want, whether it's having a disability that they cannot change, whatever it is, those tears have a different salt quality than all other human tears. They have a different saline quality than just the tears of being sad, the tears of hurting yourself. They're the tears of resilience in which the brain recognizes, "I'm not going to get what I want." And the brain goes, "Wow, this is really, really hard." And then the brain goes, "I can survive this. I can survive this." It is in the mode of sadness or disappointment that it sinks into the brain, not in trying to make the kid feel better. And so let's take a look at this. If it was easy, all our students would be adapting, all of them. But there's two main reasons kids don't adapt. One is they have what's called a wall of defense. All of us are born with a defense system. Children who are highly sensitive, children who are on the spectrum, children whose beings are more sensitive, more comes through their filters, and their defense systems are evoked more quickly because they're feeling so much. That's why often you'll see kids who say, "Whatever, it doesn't matter, who cares," or don't seem like they have a lot of feelings. It's because their defense system is protecting them. It shuts them down because they're actually feeling more. That's the irony of it. Or they have no opportunity to feel sadness, like the child with the ball. Everyone just gets the other kid a ball. Make sure everybody always has perfect lives. Make sure every child has a ball. Make sure so the child has no opportunity to experience adversity. This culture of parenting is very much that way. A child's not invited to a birthday party and all the parents freak out and, "Oh, got to make sure my kid's invited to a party." No, not necessarily. When a child has a difficult circumstance, and this is like, say, the difficult thing, whether it goes to resilience or some sort of, whether it's trauma or just some sort of major difficulty for the child, is, did they have a caring adult with which they could share their feelings of disappointment or sadness? That's it. It's not what the thing happened. And so If my child wasn't invited to a party, or my student and came up to me and said, "Oh, I was left out of that party," or whatever it is, it's not about me fixing it necessarily. I can just say, "Oh my goodness, if my friends were having a party and they didn't invite me, my feelings would be so hurt. Come on in for a hug," or whatever it is, depending whether it's your child or a student or whatever it is. We need to be making room for our students' feelings. We need to be helping them move from mad to sad. And often what happens instead is we start asking questions. Why did you hit? Or why did you do this? Or we give the child a lecture. You're too old for this, or it's not your turn for the ball. All of things which are true. But for an explosive child, telling them it's not their turn does not help. In the moment you think, how do I help this mad child feel sad? It's hard. You really wish you had a turn with the ball right now. I feel like that sometimes too when I really want something. It's about warming up our voice and making, sometimes we have no idea why our students are frustrated. We have no idea what's at all. The frustrations are just layered upon layered, and they just even can't get their zipper up and they explode. But we can know they're frustrated. We could even just say, "Oh, looks like you're having such a hard day. You're really having a frustrating day today. I see that." As opposed to just saying, "Stop it and cut it out." It allows the brain to come down. We can have, the lecture later on at a time where the child's heart's feeling warmer to us, when their heart is soft to us, then we can talk about, "Oh, earlier on today when you were kicking all those backpacks, or that your body was filled with explosions," then we can talk about it. But not in the middle of a frustration explosion. That's when we're just trying to make room to move the child from mad to sad. And if that doesn't happen, what happens is the energy comes in, the child doesn't have the changes that they wish for, or whatever it is. They're not adapting, and out it comes as attacking energy. I want to share a little story with you, a personal story. Now, obviously, I'm biased about my kids because I'm their mom, so I can't not be biased. But this experience with my eldest child really changed who I became as an educator. It changed how I saw behavior. It changed the entire trajectory of my career. My eldest son, his name is Thomas, and he is 32. He's the principal of a middle school in Bratislava in Slovakia. He's a very peaceful, loving, calm, kind guy. Obviously, I'm biased, but he's a really peaceful guy. He's traveled the world teaching kids. I'm going to step back now 27 years, and Thomas is 5 years old. And I lived in Ottawa at the time. I was going for a walk with Thomas, and we were going down the street, and it was beautiful, beautiful snowy day. It had just snowed. A family had built a snowman on their front lawn, a fresh snowman. And Thomas goes up to that snowman. He very aggressively pushes the head off of that snowman. And the family of the woman of that who lived in the house opens the door and just starts screaming at me. "What is wrong with your kid? What is wrong with your kid? My daughters and I had spent all morning building that snowman, and your kid just ruined it. Like, get your kid some help. Like, what is wrong with him?" Now, if you go back to this slide here, my son was flooded with frustration. I had just separated from his father. The family configuration he had known since day one was no longer. The house he had lived in his first 5 years of his life, we had just moved out of. He could not get the change he ached for. It even hurts me every time I tell this story because I remember him sobbing. I remember his tears. I remember exactly where we were on the sofa when he begged us to stay together. But it wasn't going to happen. And he had not yet adapted. So he had explosive energy just coursing through his system because frustration is what floods, what drives aggression. He couldn't get the change. He had not yet adapted, and out it was coming as attacking energy. Now, I'm not proud of this, but at this time, I started to parent from a place of fear. I was like, I am not going to have a bad kid. I was on my kid like a hawk. "Thomas, use your words, not your hands. Thomas, when you go to school today, do not pull kids' toques off. Thomas, when you do this, do not do this. Thomas, 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 Thomas." And Thomas's aggressive behavior just got worse and worse. I was not using timeouts, which we know increases alarm in children, and over time, their behavior is more difficult. I wasn't even yelling at Thomas. If I'm being really honest, maybe occasionally, but not for the most part. But I was all day telling Thomas how aggressive he was. And this was a very challenging time for me in my life. I spent many of my evenings writing in my journal, and I know the plant analogy, and I was thinking, what am I not seeing? What am I not seeing? And one night as I was writing in my journal, it struck me as clear as anything. Like, oh my gosh, this is me. I, as the caring leader of this child, am cementing his identity as an aggressive kid. All day, I'm telling him he's aggressive. Even before he's aggressive at school, I'm basically saying, well, I know you're going to be aggressive because that's who you are. I was all day seeing him as an aggressive kid. Now, here's the problem with this, is that children form their identity. They form their personalities in the reflection of their attachments' eyes. They don't become like their attachments. What happens is it's like they see their capacity in our eyes, whether we're their teacher, their mentors, their coach, their parents. And I was definitely seeing my kid as aggressive. So there was absolutely for sure that that was the reflection he was receiving from my eyes. And I actually felt kind of sick about it because I realized, oh my gosh, what have I done? My child is forming his personality based on what he's seeing from me and who I'm telling him he is. Unintentionally, like I obviously wasn't doing that on purpose. So I made a decision that night that I was going to imagine the most wonderful adult man I could possibly imagine. And every single time Thomas was going to be difficult, I was going to see that that's already who he is, but I just can't see it yet. Here's what we have to do when a child gets emotionally stuck, which is what difficult behavior is that we have to see their goodness before they show it to us. We have to speak it out loud and articulate it. So the next day when Thomas was difficult, and I couldn't tell you what he did, it was 27 years ago, I'd be completely lying, I have no idea what he did. I had to speak to the goodness, not the aggression part first. I had to say, Thomas, I see what a good, loving heart you have. Your frustration was just so big, it blew up over it, but we're going to get there. I see your loving heart. And then I had to make more room for his sadness and make more room for his frustration. And I had to make more room for free play. The thing that kind of freaked me out was that Thomas adapted in about 3 weeks. That's it. I thought, oh my goodness. What if I, as his caring leader, had led him to know himself otherwise? My kid, like, what if I had led him to know himself otherwise? Now, here's the thing. My kids had amazing teachers across their lives. I have 3 kids that had amazing teachers. Thomas's kindergarten teacher wasn't that person. I don't know for sure if this is true because I've never talked to her about it. It could be a story I've invented in my head. But I think that my Thomas's teacher had an unconscious bias. I was a very young single mom. I was poor. I was young. Had a surprise baby in university. Didn't have much money. And I had an aggressive kid. I think she saw that wilted plant that we talked about at the beginning. And she thought, really, is this kid going to be successful? Really? She kind of tucked that plant away. I don't think she would have guessed that my son would have had a full scholarship to Dalhousie University, done his master's in the Netherlands in neuroscience. I don't think that she didn't see capacity before there. She didn't understand that behavior was communication. She just tucked that little plant away. I'm from a middle-class family and I haven't had a lot of want. I'm very, very grateful for that experience of shame. It was the first time I experienced what it felt like to be judged in that way as a mother. And it changed how I saw my students. It changed my check of unconscious bias, whether my student was coming with different abilities, whether they were coming from harder traumatic backgrounds, or whether they were coming from economic hardship, thinking, if I cannot believe that every single child I teach has the capacity to be extraordinary so that they can see that in my eyes, I shouldn't be leading this child. No baby is born bad. I think about this sometimes when I think I'm going to end this few minutes. I realize how much short. I think I still have to end on time, I'm guessing, Carolyn. So I'm going to have to cut my material very short. We lost half of it. That's okay. This is my brother, Max. My older brother has autism. I'm the youngest of 9. I have a younger brother with Down syndrome. I have an older brother with autism. I have a very diverse family. I grew up in a beautifully diverse family. My older brother has autism. His name is Max. And I think about this sometimes because he didn't speak till he was around 10 years old. And he was kicked out of almost every single school. In those days, people didn't actually know that he had autism. They just thought he was very difficult. Living in a smaller town in England where everyone was born, we can still, I'll just go over 5 minutes. I will only, I want to give people the break that they need. That he was kicked out of every single school. Just imagine the frustration that would have been coursing through his system and not being able to communicate and not being able to talk and not being able to share his inner world with others and being so deeply misunderstood. There was no more schools to send my brother to because he had been kicked out of every school that there was to send him to. Now, my brother got into juggling. That was his play as a child. It was very rhythmic. It was a very soothing experience for his body. And my parents, thank goodness, had the deep understanding that who children think they are matters way more than who they actually are. How you feel about your capacity matters more than actually the skills that you have. And so they leaned into his gifts as a juggler and said, oh, well, everyone learns differently. So that's your thing. You love to juggle. That's fantastic. I just want to end by saying this. My brother is by far the most successful financially. I mean, it depends on what you look at as success. There's many ways to define success, but by far the most financially successful in my family. My brother never learned to read or write. I believe if he was born in this generation of children, he would have, because our schools, we have different ways to support kids with different abilities to learn to read and write. But in those days, that didn't happen. And he still doesn't know how to read or write. And he is, how old is my brother now? 65, I guess. Yeah. But my brother became Britain's best juggler. He was actually in the movie Braveheart. He's a brilliant businessman. This is him at 19, juggling in Camden Market in London. This was me last summer in Camden Market at his store called the Oddballs. He has a store in Brighton and a store in Camden Market. He owns juggling emporiums all around the world, and he's a multi-millionaire. He lives in Lithuania in a little castle. He married a juggler, has juggling kids, and lives in a castle and juggles. He's extremely successful. We have to be able to see capacity and goodness before it's shown to us. Because when we see it, we reflect that back to the child. Sometimes our need to socialize children goes beyond it's like we want to socialize them past who they even are. It's like our need for them to fit in is more than our need for them to actually be who they really are. And I have a lot of learning disabilities myself. I didn't learn how to tell the time until I was in grade 11 because I can't tell which way space is going. So for me, I wasn't able to share that with my teachers because I didn't have the emotional safety to be able to do that. Because my teachers didn't create that sense of safety where, we all learn differently. So your brain doesn't see space. I mean, I'm a successful author. I have a great life. I just learn differently than people. And my business manager knows that. She can't send me Excel spreadsheets because my brain can't hold on to linear columns. So I just work a little bit differently. People work differently. And when we can see goodness in an explosive child and think, oh, that's just stuck behavior, that doesn't mean the child's bad. No baby's born bad. It means somewhere along the line, something got a little bit stuck. And when if something can get stuck, it can get unstuck. And so those of us that have this position of caring leadership, we have to look at, okay, so there's many reasons kids are stuck right now. I'm going to just pull up a last slide because I know I don't have time now to go through all the ways that we're going to address this, but at least we can have some insight. How do we bring children to emotional rest? We feel safe when we're in relationship with those that lead us, when we feel like we can, their invitation into relationship, when their eyes light up when we walk into the room, when they're anchored, when our leaders are strong, warm, they're not trying to be our friends. They're our caring leaders, not our caring friends. That's just when attachment's built, not when we, our leaders are hesitant or nervous to lead us, but when they, they have this warm leadership, when we can create a sense of rhythm in our classes, in our schools, so that their bodies can come into a state of flow and come down. We provide room for expression, for sadness, for disappointment, for not always having to be right. And when we recognize that kids are going to require some release, they're going to require some release in a culture that took away this from them. If you think of it like this, I mean, right now, Maclean's, Maclean's magazine just asked me to write an article for them, which will be out in a couple of weeks, looking at the cluster movement that's changing right now, because this is a huge movement right now where we're like, we've got to figure this out. It's like we took away the place where kids have release naturally. We took away the kids where, this place of play. And again, this is the first time in history that kids have had this. And then instead we're just getting mad at kids instead. We're just saying, stop it, cut it out. We're basically saying, hold all that frustration in, instead of thinking, what are we going to do as school communities to help these kids get it out? How are we going to provide some room for release? And so I'm going to just pull up my last slide here. I will pull up the book because people have asked there. And I'll also pull this up because I know I'm supposed to end. But I do want to say that my book comes with 70 pages of activities, inclusive activities, and all the books I write are inclusive. All my movement and expression books are also inclusive. They're actually just photos of my students with in them, and students with Down syndrome, students who are in wheelchairs, students with all different types of bodies, with intellectual differences. Because inclusivity isn't just about putting kids together and of mixed abilities into a room and crossing your fingers. That's not inclusion. Inclusion is when we create a culture of togetherness that does not require sameness, and that we can be together and sense our humanity together. And so we have a huge flux of social emotional learning. And I'm like, no. We should have social emotional doing. This is about stopping just talking to kids about emotional health and saying, how do we help them to experience it? How do we help them to experience this together? And so the activities are geared to pre-K to grade 12. They're all inclusive. They're geared to adults and facilitators, teachers who've never facilitated anything like this in their lives. And they're separated into categories of lowering aggression, awakening caring, or building inclusive communities. So you can download them for free. You can go to the website and there's 70 pages of activities. We lost half the workshop, but that's okay. You got a little tidbit of a window in. Some of you will be with me this afternoon when we look at cell phones and sort of what happened there and aggression, and there will be a bit more on play in there as well. And that's okay. Life happens, and it will just take a deep breath, a little bit more resilience built into our systems when things become difficult. So I thank those of you that waited it out and were patient during the ins and outs. I think we entered the room 7 or 8 times. So thank you so much, everyone. Thanks, Carmen. It was worth waiting. Well, that's good. Even though you got half, you had a window in. You didn't get too much of the how to fix the strategies, but you got a window into a little bit. Thanks so much. Thanks, Bethany and Phoebe and Chantel. Thank you, everyone. Anita, thanks. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry. Yes, Hannah, I just wanted to say on behalf of ChiBC, we're so grateful and we're so thankful that you shared so much vulnerability and so much practicality as well. And I know, yeah, honestly, I'm just so well, half of me is just so embarrassed that this has happened and we had to
Oh,
shorten the session.
it's not
Because I'm so biased, but I really wanted every single minute of you. And so but I will take the hour. I will take everything that I can get from you. And so just from myself personally, as well as from TIBC, just thank you. Thank you for doing this work because it really, really matters. And then I know I'm left feeling inspired as well. So I'll be here hopefully with you next in the afternoon with a very large
fingers crossed.
Zoom room. But truly, I really appreciate your patience and understanding and flexibility to everybody who's here. So the session obviously is recorded, it'll be posted. Yeah, fingers crossed for next time. So
Fingers crossed. We'll see some of you shortly. And don't, Carolyn, it's just let it go. You don't have any control over it. You're not the technical person. Life, we're all building resilience. Our brains
yeah.
are realizing we
I
can
was
do
like,
hard things. It's all good.
I was like, I will sit in this sadness and this is gonna make me stronger. So it's
A
good.
little disappointed, and then the brain goes, it's all good. We survived it. Take care. We'll see everybody soon that's coming. Bye-bye.